Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la wa nashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa ahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka anta alimul hakim wa na'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I'm going to make this quick and short. Sincerity. What do we understand by sincerity? Language is an interesting thing because there is a lot of ambiguity in language by its nature, but there is a lot of meaning in language. And language is meaning of something that is expressed. Modern secularism will try to classify human civilization as something that is a product of science in their philosophical statements that science is the hallmark of human civilization. But we disagree. Islam disagrees with that notion. Islam emphasizes that language is the hallmark of human civilization because in language is contained meaning, and meaning is the true form of what is then going to be represented by object, by symbolism, by speech, by sound, by frequency, by whatever else that it represents. So when using the term sincerity, what is assimilated by it in the modern sense of the term is that it represents something of truth. That when I am being sincere with somebody, I am telling that person the truth. But my sincerity is not just a blatant, outright truth, because the truth can also hurt. And what the truth hurts is it hurts the ego. It doesn't hurt the individual's physical self or the individual's intellectual self, because the intellect, the rational mind, is always accepting the truth. It is the individual's desires that are hurt, the individual's ego and arrogance that is hurt. So sincerity is something that is not just the truth, but it has got a sense of purity with it. In its definition, the English term comes from the Latin definition sincerus, which means clean and pure. And because it's a scholastic language, it can also be understood in equilibrium with Arabic, which is also a scholastic language. And the term used is Ikhlaas, from khalasa, which means clean and pure and sincere. So the level that sincerity is given is a level of truth, and it is affiliated with humility, so that when the truth is delivered, it is in a state of utmost purity. This purity is inherent in the human being. The human being's creation and his nature, which is the fitrah, includes this sense of purity. Now, fitrah is not just the nature of the being that has a natural inclination to God. It is not a thing, it's not an object that is part and composite of the human being. So we tend to conceptualize our existence in composition. So we look at our human body and we compose our human body as parts and components of many into one. And we tend to understand ourselves in the same way. We look at compartmentalizing ourselves, whereas it's not an exact science that you can determine what your essential self would be. So fitrah is not a thing. It is a nature. It is a trait. It's like a blueprint that the human being has. And that nature is something that is deeply rooted in your rational self, in your intelligence, in your intellect. So the human soul, which is you, your identity, your nafs, has got two dimensions. And again, by dimensions, we don't mean the compartmentalization of two as one. It's a dimension in terms of you've got two different types of natures. An individual can have an outgoing nature and an inward nature. You can be an extrovert or an introvert. You've got two dimensions. These two dimensions are the rational soul and the animal soul. The rational soul is the intelligent being, the person or the self that tries to learn, to acquire, to know, and is always in search of the truth, because he recognizes that the truth is sincere, it is pure, and it cannot be refuted, and he would rather be inclined towards that. The animal soul is the carnal soul. It is the desire. It is the one that is rooted to the ground, to the earth. It is the soul that includes your hunger, your sexual desires. It is the soul that includes your envy and your jealousy, your anger, your overwhelming emotions. And the ultimate battle between the two is the battle between your intellect and your desire. And what Islam dictates as the deen that you would submit to is the submission of your animal soul to your intellectual soul. Your animal desires would submit and enslave themselves to your rational self, so that your rational self can make the decisions that are sincere and that are pure. The concept of Ikhlaas defines what the human intellect strives to achieve. And this concept is embedded into Surah Al-Ikhlaas. Surah Al-Ikhlaas does not just speak about God's oneness. It elaborates how the human being should perceive God and how it would naturally perceive God. So what's your natural state of perception and conceptualization of God? We find human nature is such that it always tries to verify. Anything that the human being encounters will attempt to verify and authenticate it. Without that verification, without that authentication, the human being is essentially in a state of skepticism and doubt. Now, that is not to say that all verification is true, because the human being can be confounded with false verification, but we're not debating falseness or accuracy of the verification. It's the nature of the human being to find and look for verification. And in that sense of looking for verification, its foremost stance of accepting anything that is brought to it is a stance of skepticism or a stance of negation. The human being will always negate anything that is brought forward. It doesn't matter what aspect of the world you live in or what aspect of knowledge you explore. Even if you're studying, say, an academic subject in school, your sense of verification is having trust and faith that your teacher is giving you accurate information. And that gives you the comfort that you have already verified what is coming to you, right? Your sense of asking questions in terms of verification is your sense of doubt or skepticism. It doesn't make sense to me, whatever it is that he's telling me. So you would ask to verify. Your immediate stance is a negation before you can accept whatever is given to you. And this nature is something that Allah has put into us, and He recognizes it. Which is why, first and foremost, the act of taking the Shahada and accepting Allah, in itself, the structure of Shahada, in the language that Allah delivers it, there is a negation first, and then there is an affirmation. There is La ilaha, in which you negate everything else, and then you accept illallah. The same concept is applied throughout the Qur'an, and this is why Allah gives you proof to back up whatever He's saying, because He knows that you will need that verification. When He says, "Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad," this surah, the blueprint of this surah, contains what is known in philosophy as negative theology. What this surah does, each ayah of this surah negates all that is kufr by the logical affirmation of all that is true, right? So it negates all the forms of kufr by affirming what is true. So and each of these ayah negates two forms of kufr. So the entire surah negates what theologians call the 8 forms of kufr. When He's saying "Qul huwa Allahu ahad," say that Allah is one, this ayah negates the ta'adudiyya wal iqsam. The ta'adudiyya and al-iqsam is saying that Allah is more than one, or He is a composite of many parts into one. So in affirming that he is one is affirming that he is complete, by negating anything else that would assimilate that he is more than one, or he is a composite of more than one. So he's got parts, he's got hands, he's got eyes, he's got nose, he's got face. So anything that, when even if the Quran is saying it in that way, that Allah made the universe or created the universe with his hands, it is not literally that he has hands, it is metaphoric speech as a metaphor in speech. Allahu Samad, Allah is the eternal, negates the naqs and the aib, which is any deficiency or defect in Allah. So he is eternal and he is complete in that form, in his essence, that he has got no deficiency, nor does he have any defect. He does not need to replenish himself, he does not need to fix himself, he is complete in that form. Lam yalid wa lam yulad is perhaps the most important piece, because it defines the entirety of physics, physicality and cosmology. It doesn't matter if you're in optics or astrophysics or any form of science, where science is knowledge of the world. It doesn't matter which field you take on to. This ayah negates anything to do with cause and effect. So in a closed system, for example, the laws of thermodynamics in physics only define what can be defined in a closed loop, right? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. Energy is transferred from medium to medium. Entropy is maximum chaos. It only applies to the closed system of physicality. So it raises Allah above and beyond physicality, that he has neither cause nor does he have any effect. He does not beget, nor is he begotten. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He has no cause, or he does not cause, and he himself is not an effect of a cause. And the last, walam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. This is the shubh and nadir, which is there is no likeness to him, nor is there anything opposite in likeness to him. So in Christian theology, when God says he created man in his image, it does not mean he has got an image. It is the creation of man by giving him attributes, that he also has those attributes. So if Allah is all merciful, man can also be merciful. If Allah is all forgiving, man can also be forgiving. If Allah is truthful, man can also be truthful. That's what the likeness is denoting. It does not denote a likeness of form or substance or composition. He is unlike laysa kamithli shay'in. He is unlike anything that you could possibly conceptualize. And all that you can conceptualize, he is also unlike anything the opposite of what you can conceptualize. And these are the 8 forms of kufr. By negating all these 8 forms of kufr, you have attained what is now identified as Tawheed. Now Tawheed has its roots drawn from sincerity, from Ikhlaas, because Tawheed is the sincere affirmation of God as one. Tawheed is not monotheism. Monotheism is a term coined by secular philosophy to identify those who are religious, and in that category of religious people, they worship one God, compared to polytheism, who worship many gods. Monotheism is just a term. It's a semantic term. Tawheed does not denote monotheism. Tawheed is the seeing of the many, of the one in the many. That is Tawheed. It's the bringing back of all that is multiplicity into one, and recognizing that there is only one behind everything else. Multiplicity in metaphysics is denoted as one being whole, and then one and one can also give you whole, but 3 is where multiplicity begins. So the structure of language is such that one symbol will give you its own denotation, 2 might give you a similarity to that one denotation, but 3 is where the root construct of words begins. So the Arabic language begins with a multiplicity of 3-letter root words. And it is the rational soul, the intellectual soul, that seeks to now go back to the roots, and that is the fitrah. The fitrah is the highest. It is the base intellect, that is the nature, but it is also the highest intellect. After all the learning that you can do, all the knowledge that you can accumulate, ultimately all that knowledge has to be surmised into identifying where does it come from, where do you come from, and who is the one, in recognizing his place in relation to his creation. Tawheed is studied under Usuluddin, and Usuluddin means the principles or the essence of deen. It's not the structure or the semantic structure of deen that includes the rites and the rituals, the fiqh and the sharia, the dynamics, circumstances. It is the usul, the essence of deen, meaning what is your understanding of deen? Is your understanding of deen related to seeing the one in the many? And if that is your understanding of reality, then you are essentially seeing Tawheed. You are essentially following Tawheed sincerely. So the fitrah is something that only recognizes the one, and it does so sincerely and purely. So the objective of the human being is that he comes from the one. And in this world, he begins his journey through multiplicity of seeing the many. And ultimately, after seeing the many, he returns to the one. And this is the concept of returning back to Allah. From him we came and to him we return. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And the raja'a is the returning back to him. And the return is when he asked before he sent us to this world, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And the response came, Bala shahidna. Indeed, we testify. This was your rational self that testified, not the animal self. It was your rational, intellectual, and fitrah self that testified. It is the return back to that natural state. That is ultimate ihsan. And if you do it sincerely, then you will return to him sincerely. If you do it with doubt and skepticism, then it is better to rectify that doubt and skepticism, because ultimate submission has to be sincere. It cannot be with hesitation. Right? ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.